Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing government and politics and its relationship to sport. The objective of this video is for you to learn about how government and politics are intertwined with sport at both the national and international level. I will discuss the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, sport diplomacy and the U.S. State Department, how the Olympics have been a worldwide stage for demonstrations, boycotts, and bans from athletes and countries, and lastly, how the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics initiated peaceful communication between North and South Korea. The President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition is a federally funded advisory board here in the United States, whose mission is dedicated to promoting an active and healthy lifestyle for all young people around the country. President John F. Kennedy established the President's Council to promote physical fitness and sport participation for U.S. citizens. One of the first recommendations of the Council was for all schools in the U.S. to provide at least 15 minutes of vigorous exercise per day. At that time, 75% of U.S. schools had no daily class for physical education. Now, kindergarten through 12th grade schools here in the U.S. have a mandatory PE class for students, and the class is part of the fabric of the education system here in the U.S. In this current day, the President's Council promotes health and fitness through their online presence by creating various initiatives that revolve around sports, fitness, and nutrition. An example of the President's Council has a National Fitness and Sports Month, which takes place during the month of May. During this time, the Council encourages everyone to #MoveInMay. And they use May as a month to promote various initiatives to inspire people to be more active, whether it is to walk, run, dance, or to play. The President's Council has initiatives for both young people and adults and gives advice on how parents can participate in helping their young children to be more active and healthy. The President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition work with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to make sure that they are adhering to the right guidelines for how to be healthy. These guidelines touch on food and nutrition, which involve more information on the dietary guidelines for evidence-based recommendations on nutrition, physical activity, which give guidelines for how Americans can improve health by moving, health literacy, which is an initiative that revolves around communication and health, and in this initiative, participants are able to access information on health and healthcare and learn more about how to improve their health in a way that is easy for them to understand. And last, healthcare quality, where Americans from all backgrounds can learn how to improve healthcare and patient care quality. The President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition also has an initiative called the Pala Plus Challenge, which is an 8-week program that helps individuals 6 years and older to either maintain or improve their health goals. Participants are able to develop a commitment to regular physical activity, help people to move towards a healthier eating pattern, and to set realistic goals which encourage healthy eating and good physical activity habits. Now, I will move on and discuss sports diplomacy. According to the U.S. State Department website, sports diplomacy uses the universal passion for sports as a way to transcend linguistic and sociocultural differences and bring people together. Participation in sports teaches leadership, teamwork, and communication skills that help young people succeed in all areas of their lives. Sport is a universal language, and regardless of what language you speak, you can be on the court, in a swimming pool, or on a field and interact with someone from Europe, Africa, or Asia, with your common bond being the sport that you are playing or competing in. Sports diplomacy is not a new concept, but it has gained more traction in recent years. Probably the most notable and remembered act of sports diplomacy would be in the 1970s when the US and the People's Republic of China were able to foster communication through table tennis, or ping pong. The US and China's relationship after the Second World War was less than ideal. So eventually the US and China were able to come together through ping pong. And this happened after the US table tennis team accepted an invitation from China in 1971 to play ping pong. President Richard Nixon then made the historical journey to China in 1972 to establish diplomatic relations between the US and China. Sport diplomacy is part of the US State Department, and the US State Department's role is to advise the President of the United States and guide the US on issues that revolve around foreign policy. The US Department negotiates peace treaties and various agreements with different foreign entities and tries to create a forum for communication between the US and other nations. In summary, sports diplomacy is used as a soft power to create and maintain relationships near and far. The US State Department is able to do this through sports envoys, the US Sports Visitors Program, and the Global Sports Mentoring Program. Sports envoys are when notable US athletes and coaches travel overseas and lead clinics and facilitate programs in their specific sport. Members of these sport envoys come from the relationship the US State Department has with the US Olympic Committee, different US sport federations, and the US soccer or US basketball or professional US sport leagues like Major League Baseball or the National Basketball Association. During these envoys, athletes and or coaches conduct clinics with children and adults in a specific country. The local population is able to engage with sport athletes and coaches and learn more about sport and culture in the United States. Again, to understand the importance of the role sport and diplomacy play, we must understand the relationship and history of the countries that the U.S. looks to work with. For example, in 2016, Shaquille O'Neal went down to Cuba as a part of the Sport Envoy program through the U.S. State Department. Shaq went down to Cuba on a people-to-people program in which basketball was used as a vehicle for cultural understanding and cooperation. In Cuba, Shaq led a basketball clinic with Cuban children and showed participants how sport could help with education, teamwork, and leadership. Shaq was able to draw on his experience from playing in the NBA for 19 seasons and being a successful businessman. This was a historic visit, and the goal of sending Shaq to Cuba was for him to promote and encourage positive relationship building between the U.S. and Cuban government, which has had a strained relationship due to the Cold War, communism, and the U.S. embargo. Cuba is a neighbor of the United States, and the goal of the Sport Envoy will hopefully have a long-term impact and help with communication and understanding between the two nations. The U.S. State Department also has a sports visitors program. Currently, the program is focused on bringing girls and women
to the US to participate in a 2-week exchange program in which participants can learn about Title IX and how to apply the ideology of Title IX in their home country so that their country can start or continue to improve opportunities for girls and women in sport. The Center for Sport, Peace, and Society, out of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, facilitates the program with Sports United, and they work together with the U.S. State Department to create dozens of programs for girls and women all over the world. In fact, the Sports Visitors Program has hosted soccer players from Brazil, volleyball players from the Gulf, and basketball players from Senegal. The program has since started to incorporate athletes with physical disabilities who come to the U.S. to learn more about adaptive sport programs and opportunities. Lastly, the U.S. State Department has the Global Sports Mentoring Program. This program empowers women from around the world by bringing some of the top female athletes, coaches, and administrators from around the world to participate in a month-long mentoring program in the United States, where they make connections and create an action plan to improve advancing gender equality or disability rights in their respective nations.
In 2018, the program was an honoree for the ESPN Stuart Scott Inspire Award at ESPN's Humanitarian Awards. Go Sport Diplomacy! So, here you have another example of how sport can influence politics, specifically at a government and diplomatic level. So, government, politics, and sport go hand in hand, and in many cases, and in this is particularly evident in the Olympic movement. The Olympics have been a worldwide stage for demonstrations from athletes raising their fists to bring awareness to racial injustices, countries boycotting because of differences in politics, values, and or safety, or countries being banned because of the aggression in a world war, or issues revolving around human rights. Bringing awareness to certain social, political, and human rights issues before, during, or after a sporting event is nothing new. Now, we see it more often because we have access to various types of media during all times of the day. In this next part, I'm going to take you on a short journey of how government, politics, and sports have collided during the Olympics. Please note that a demonstration has taken place at the majority of Olympic Games. And in this next part, I'm going to give an example of how a boycott, demonstration, or ban has taken place in the Olympics. After the First World War, Germany and Austria, Bulgaria, and Turkey were all banned from the Summer Olympic Games in Antwerp, Belgium, because of their participation in World War I. In 1936, Spain and France decided to boycott the Summer Olympic Games in Munich, Germany, because of racist Nazi policies and Hitler's rise to power. At one point, the United States thought about boycotting the Olympics because of what was happening, but Avery Brundage, who was at the time the president of the American Olympic Committee, now the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, went to Germany to visit prior to the Olympic Games and decided that the U.S. should still go. He stated that the very foundation of the modern Olympics revival will be undermined if individual countries are allowed to restrict participation by reason of class, creed, or race. American athletes went to the Olympics that year in Germany, where the Nazi Party was able to use the Olympic Games to promote their regime, instill their ideologies, and use the Games as political propaganda. Adolf Hitler, who had effectively become Germany's dictator in 1933, had instituted a Aryans-only policy throughout all of German athletic organizations because he wanted to show that Germany had the superior race. Remember, this was right before the Second World War, and there were amazing Jewish athletes in Germany, but they were not allowed to compete because of Hitler's racist policies towards Jewish people. Hitler attempted to show the world Aryan superiority in sports, but that didn't happen because of a man named Jesse Owens. During the 1936 Olympic Games in Germany, the U.S. had an outstanding performance in Berlin, and both black and white athletes competed alongside each other and ended up winning gold for the United States. Track and field athlete Jesse Owens ended up winning 4 gold medals in Germany and was revered by many at the Games. Perhaps not Hitler, though. Racial and ethnic discrimination was very real in 1936. Jesse Owens will forever go down in history as being one of the best Olympians and proving Hitler wrong with his athletic performance theory of Aryan superiority. Although white and black athletes competed side by side in 1936, the 17 black American Olympians, including Jesse Owens, were not invited to the White House after the Olympics to meet with President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and were still discriminated against after winning gold for their country. After the 1936 Olympic Games, the Olympics did not take place again until 1948 because of World War II. It was at this time that both Germany and Japan were both banned from the 1948 London Summer Olympic Games and the 1948 Winter Olympics in St. Moritz, Switzerland, due to their aggression in World War II. The Olympics have had boycotts throughout their modern history. One boycott that took place that involved multiple countries was during the 1956 Summer Olympics in Melbourne, Australia. The Netherlands, Switzerland, and Spain boycotted the Olympics because of the Soviet invasion of Hungary. Egypt, Lebanon, and Iran boycotted because of the Suez Canal War. And China boycotted because of Taiwan's participation in the Olympics. Whew, that is a lot of boycotting going around, huh? So now let's move on to 1968, when the Summer Olympics took place in Mexico City. Before the Olympics took place, thousands of students were protesting the government, and they wanted the government to free political prisoners and respect their rights to protest. Authorities feared the student movement would disrupt the Olympic Games, and the Mexican government opened fire on a student protest in the capital's Tlatelolco Plaza. This would later be known as the Tlatelolco Plaza Massacre. The death toll has never been clear, and an official report at the time put it at 26, while student leaders estimated that it had to be at least 190 people. By the time the Olympic Games came around, another protest took place with John Carlos, Tommy Smith, and Peter Norman. This protest was supported by the Olympic Project for Human Rights. Images from this protest would later be called the Black Power Salute. All 3 athletes protested racial inequality during the playing of the U.S. national anthem at the Olympic Games in Mexico City, after winning the gold, silver, and bronze medals. The 2 African American athletes were immediately banned from the U.S. team and not allowed to enter the Olympic Village. Peter Norman, an Australian runner who stood in solidarity with Carlos and Smith, was shunned by his own country and not allowed to compete for Australia in the future, even though he qualified to represent Australia in track and field in international competitions. The 1968 protest was seen as divisive and unacceptable, according to the IOC president at the time. But now, right now, the image of the trio is viewed as an iconic because the athletes stood up for racial inequality and human rights. 1976 saw 28 African nations boycott the Montreal Summer Olympic Games because of the International Olympic Committee's refusal to ban New Zealand from participation in the Games. The boycott was because the New Zealand National Rugby Union team had toured South Africa earlier in 1976 in defiance of the United Nations calls for a sporting embargo because of apartheid. In 1980, the US and 29 of its allies boycotted the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow, Russia, because of the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan. 4 years later, in 1984, Russia decided to boycott the LA Summer Olympic Games with their allies because of what happened four years earlier in 1980. So, for 3 consecutive Olympiads, we saw boycotts from countries all around the world. Those are just some of the most notable demonstrations, bans, and boycotts in Olympic history. I encourage you to do some research and look up information on more recent Olympiads and some demonstrations that have taken place. For instance, in the 2016 Olympics, Ethiopian runner Faiza Lelesa ran across the finish line with his arms crossed in an X position to bring attention to the Oromo people of Ethiopia, where a wave of anti-government protests began in the region in November 2015, with people protesting the social and political marginalization of the Oromo people. Faiza Lelesa then asked for government political asylum in fear of what would happen to him if he went back to Ethiopia due to his demonstration in Rio, Brazil during the 2016 Summer Olympics. Lelesa urged the international community, particularly the United States, to put pressure on the Ethiopian government to give the Oromo people their rights. Things are looking better for Ethiopia, and Lelesa has recently went back to his home country of Ethiopia and was welcomed by fans, family, and even the foreign minister of Ethiopia. See, protests, demonstrations, and bans still happen. But sometimes we don't see it because we are so focused on the winning and the gold when we're watching the Olympics. However, countries and athletes have used sports to bring attention to various social and political issues. This has been happening for over a century, and I am sure you will be able to research and find some current examples of how politics and government are intertwined with sport. We will end the video by discussing how North and South Korea were able to use sport as a way to start peace talks between the two nations. Throughout 2017, tensions were high around the world with the fear of a nuclear threat of North Korea to the Western world. Many feared that North Korea would attack neighboring South Korea or parts of the U.S. or U.S. territories. By the time of the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympics, North and South Korea were walking out together as one united country under the Korea flag. In fact, they created a joint women's hockey team to compete in the Winter Olympics. After this display of a united front, negotiations between the two countries continued, and they put in a joint bid to host the 2032 Summer Olympics. Sport has been used by people, governments, and organizations to have their voices be heard on a worldwide stage. I hope that after listening to this video, you will start to think more about if it is even possible to separate sport from politics or the government. I encourage you to think about your local community and the impact that politics and government have on sport, from funding to access to promotion to certain sports within your community. I will leave you with this quote from Nelson Mandela, who was the first democratically elected president of South Africa. He brought the 1995 Rugby World Cup to South Africa in hopes of uniting the country after apartheid. In the words of Nelson Mandela, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language that they understand. Sports can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than government in breaking down racial barriers. So thank you for listening, and please make sure to do some research on government, politics, and sports.